I was washing the dishes the other day when my 10-year-old daughter comes up to me and she says, "Daddy, do you know where the deepest part of the ocean is?" Deepest part of the ocean, I say. I immediately start thinking to myself how to respond to this inquisitive and obviously intelligent child of mine, imagining a career filled with exploration and going to new depths, engineering. I was about to tell her that I know a person, well, not really, but I know people who know a person who is going to be in Monaco next week who's actually been to the deepest part of the ocean. I was about to remind her that we watched Dr. Don Wright's video, a friend of mine, first woman and person of color to go to the deepest part of the ocean. And then I thought, I should pull up the GEBCO map and show her what it looks like, Marianas Trench, Challenger Deep. But I didn't. I took a pause, and I decided that maybe she wasn't looking for this opportunity for me to mansplain to her about ocean floor exploration. That maybe, just maybe, she already knew where the deepest part of the ocean was. So instead, I replied, "Gosh, Ivy, I don't know. Where is the deepest part of the ocean?" She looked at me with a little smirk, as only she can do, says, "It's simple, at the bottom." And then she walked off to go play with her toys. Mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue au Musée Oceanographique de Monaco. C'est une belle journée et je suis honoré à bienvenue à tout le monde ici pour le symposium de GEBCO, de Map the Gaps, un événement de GEBCO. My friends, colleagues, esteemed guests, hosts, sponsors, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, I welcome you to the Oceanographic Museum. It's a beautiful day, and I wish to welcome all of you here to the Map the Gaps Symposium, a GEBCO event. Over the next 2 days, you're going to hear from a wide variety of inspirational and thought-provoking presentations, panels, and discussion on the topic of ocean floor exploration. Today focuses on technologies, trends, policies, inspirational ideas, as well as acknowledging and celebrating 120 years of GEBCO, which started right here in Monaco, not far from this building, maybe in this building. Tomorrow, we explore crowdsourced bathymetry, which is really a community, a citizen initiative and movement to get other individuals, organizations, and groups, communities involved in ocean floor exploration, really, truly empowering others. But before we get started with some opening remarks and this morning's keynote speaker, I'd like to review some logistics to make this morning as pleasant as possible for you. Let's get started in order of priority. The toilets are located outside the doors on the left down the stairs. The Wi-Fi, we seem to be having some problems with. However, it does appear that Musée Oceanic is an open network, and I think I'm seeing some nodding heads that people are able to get on that Wi-Fi. We have another one, Map the Gaps 2023, but might be some problems with that. So we'll continue to work on that and make sure the password is available. In the meantime, we should be fine. Coffee will be served at the break. There's a break this morning and a break this afternoon, coffee and tea, quite obvious at the back, where we'll be able to mingle and professionally network with others. Lunch is a 1-hour lunch break, and you're on your own for lunch today. We'd like independence and opportunity for people to have time with their colleagues. And I also invite you, if you see someone who's alone, maybe invite them to join you for lunch. Many people attend these types of events on their own. They don't have other colleagues here, so it's a great opportunity to meet someone. And if you're fortunate to be with other colleagues, and maybe invite them to join you. In the event of a fire, and ooh la la, pardon-moi, I'm having a deja vu moment. There are emergency exits outside. over the doors, and I think we just exit down the steps, and that wouldn't possibly happen, forcing an evacuation, disruption, and relocation of a symposium to another event. But it is possible, and it is what made the symposium last year one of the hottest events in town. Finally, this event is being live streamed to YouTube right now. If YouTube is unfamiliar to you, please ask your children. As well, portions of this event will be trimmed down and broadcast on TikTok. And if TikTok is also unfamiliar to you, then please ask my children. The agenda is online, sked.com. That's the URL there. It's also on, I think it's on the agenda, printed agenda as well. There is a printed agenda, there's a PDF version online, and then there's sked.com, which is live. On sked.com, which is just a web application, you'll also see all of the bios of the speakers and generally the order of the speaking event presenters as well. We have hundreds of people online who are registered, at least for this event, and in order for them to be able to participate equitably, we are using an app called Slido, which you can scan this QR code. There's a few places around, or you can go to slido.com and enter this number 1717370, which has been cut off from the slide, unfortunately. So 1717370, but it is on multiple places. And you can ask questions through Slido, and myself and a few people on our team are moderating the questions as they come in. And so people online, if you're listening to this or watching this right now, you can use Slido. You can also search for Map the Gaps for 1717370. However, you can also use Slido here in the audience. You can just go to the website, enter in this code, and then you may feel more comfortable. We do have 3 roaming mics, but in case we don't get to you, or you're busy surfing your new favorite app, TikTok, it'll give you an opportunity to take a break from that and then ask a question via Slido. So we'll be moderating all of that. It's also very important to mention our sponsors. This event would not be possible without our sponsors, Seabed 2030, Schmid Ocean Institute, Fugro, and T-Carta. Thank you very much for the support. This event would not be possible without you. And of course, I would also be remiss if I didn't mention our incredible hosts, the International Hydrographic Organization, as well as endorsements from the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, GEBCO, and Map the Gaps. None of this would be possible. We wouldn't be sitting here without the incredible generosity of the Oceanographic Institute, Prince Albert I of Monaco Foundation, and the Oceanographic Museum. So thank you so kindly for offering this space to us. And unless there's any questions for me, then without any further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Cyril Gomez. Mr. Gomez is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the Institute here, the Oceanographic Institute, Prince Albert I of Monaco. He joined the administration in 2000 and has an illustrious career. His professional record is distinctive for its actions in favor of sustainable development and its commitment to public policies.
Good morning and welcome to Monaco and to the Oceanographic Museum, Mr. and Ms. Presidents and Directors of the Intergovernmental Organization, Mrs. and Mr. Directors, dear friends. I'm delighted to welcome you here in this historical venue, which links us through our common passion, the ocean. I'm also pleased that the Oceanographic Institute is a partner for the GEBCO Map the Gaps 2023 Symposium. This event holds a special significance within these walls, as you know, because these walls were established over a century ago by Prince Albert I. Our two histories share a deep and interconnected bond. Prince Albert I, a visionary and great navigator, played a pioneering role in the early 20th century by recognizing the central importance of underwater topography to map the seafloor. His commitment was groundbreaking, as it led to the establishment of the General Bathymetric Chart of the Ocean, known as GEBCO, to map the entire ocean floor. This project is celebrating its 120th century now in 2023. Let me take a moment to briefly reflect on the visionary drive and founding role of Prince Albert I of Monaco. Although the idea of mapping the seabed emerged in 1899 with the establishment of the International Commission for Suboceanic Nomenclature, tasked with drawing up a bathymetric chart of all the seas, it wasn't until 1903 that the project really took off during Prince Albert I's presidency of this commission. Prince Albert I financed the creation of the first edition of the GEBCO, which was published in 1905, and played a key role in launching the second edition. And this second edition was published in 1912 and was prepared here in the Oceanographic Museum. Not only was Prince Albert I convinced of the value of this initiative, but he had also grasped the criteria necessary for its implementation. I'd like to recall a few words he said on April 25, 1921, in Washington, during his discourse on the ocean. He was already highlighting the imperative need to collaboratively explore the last frontier on Earth. I quote, "I realized then that the bathymetric chart of all the seas of the globe was necessary as a basis and a program for the great work to which I have consecrated my life. All hydrographic and oceanographic centers of the world have appreciated this fact and are now sending me abundant data bearing this subject." End of quotation. Thanks to the combined efforts of explorers and experts in cartography, marine technology, ocean sciences, maritime policy, and so on, GEBCO is continuously being updated using the latest technological achievements. I would like to acknowledge here your valuable contribution in this regard. The global mapping work is an essential component of sustainable ocean management. It has rightly been recognized as a flagship program known as Seabed 2030 as part of the UN Decade of the Ocean. Its objective is to map 100% of the ocean floors by 2030. Currently, 20% of the seabed has been mapped, compared to only 6% back to 2017. Although there is still a long way to go, the momentum is clearly underway, and we all need to play our part in collecting data on the seabed. The Monaco Exploration Society, which is also here in the Oceanographic Museum and which is supported by the Oceanographic Institute, carried out a mission in the Indian Ocean in October and November 2022. During this endeavor, they received support from the GEBCO project, and this collaboration proved to be highly fruitful. While the GEBCO project played a substantial role in preparing for the mission by providing bathymetric readings based on available satellite imagery, the data collected during this mission will in turn contribute to the GEBCO project. It's a great example of collaboration to build on and expand, which we are particularly proud of here. Seabed mapping is an essential asset for both fundamental and applied ocean knowledge to manage resources, keep track of environmental changes, and protect the ocean. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Cyril. Wait, I have a small gift for you. Come back. On behalf of the organizers here at the symposium and our guests, thank you very much for your support and contribution. We appreciate it. Sincerely.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Our next guest this morning is Luigi Sinapi. He's the director of one of the directors at International Hydrographic Organization and responsible for interregional coordination and support programs. He oversees capacity building initiatives such as the Empowering Women in Hydrography project. He is Rear Admiral of the Italian Navy, and before joining the IHO, he was the director of the Hydrographic Institute. He spent a long time at sea and has a number of NATO security missions under his belt for which he was decorated. He was also commander of a hydrographic survey vessel, commander of a frigate, and commander of a destroyer in the Italian Navy. I welcome Luigi Sinapi from the IHO to come up.
Yes. So thank you. Thank you very much. If you can put the slides that I prepared on the video, thank you. And distinguished guests and dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, Director Gomez, thank you for this opportunity to speak at this important event. And on behalf of the IHO Secretariat, the IHO Secretary General, unfortunately not present here today, and the 98 member states of the IHO, welcome to this 8th Map the Gaps Symposium, which for the first time is being held here in Monaco in this wonderful Oceanographic Museum. It is no coincidence that for this event we return to Monaco to celebrate the GEBCO's 120th anniversary. We started in May this year here in Monaco during the IHO Assembly in the presence of His Serene Highness Prince Albert II. Let me say that we are the unique international intergovernmental organization having the honor to have a sovereign of state present at our General Assembly. We continued in June at the IOC UNESCO Assembly, the other GEBCO's parent organization, in the presence of Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Monaco to UNESCO. And today, we are here in Monaco, in the beautiful Oceanographic Museum, to underline the indissoluble and very lively fil rouge between GEBCO and the Principality of Monaco, where, after the first 120 years, GEBCO and all that it implies is very much alive. I would like to give especially warm thanks to Mr. Gomez, Director General of the Oceanographic Institute Foundation Albert Premier, for his wonderful welcome in this marvelous conference hall, which is the most appropriate venue when the theme of a symposium is ocean mapping. But why? Well, the idea of ocean mapping was not only born here in Monaco, now already 120 years ago. This program, as we would name it today, has had strong relations to this prestigious institution from the start. It was Prince Albert I, Sovereign Prince of the Principality of Monaco, who was instrumental in taking a global approach to map the oceans. The monument placed near to this building in the adjacent parking lot presents him at the helm of a vessel. It is really worth noting that the Prince of the Seas, as he was called by his contemporaries, was at the helm of this unprecedented mapping endeavor. And as a side note, this was only one facet of the talents and undertakings of this impressive person. The Prince did not only create the vision, but took steps to make it a reality. Thanks to his initiatives and sponsorship, the first global folio of ocean maps was presented. The responsibility to distribute and assist the maintenance of the folio was placed on the Oceanographic Museum in 1912. This duty was in place until 1929, before it was taken on by the International Hydrographic Bureau, installed here in Monaco in 1921, also a brainchild of Albert I. The ongoing existence of the two institutions, the Oceanographic Museum and the IHO, embodies the principles that Monaco stands for: a focus on the marine environment, the capacity to reinvent itself, and the belief in international cooperation across political and social boundaries. The mission of these two organizations, though distinct in constitution and mission, have clearly complementary functions in conveying a global image of the conditions of the oceans. Ocean mapping being the baseline data set means that both missions come together, and the GEBCO program is the vehicle for this. The GEBCO program itself has come a long way of the last century plus. The number of soundings contained in the first folio were really sparse. The 30,000 soundings contained in this folio are equal to an amount which is collected by a modern multi-beam echo-sounder in 1 second. Thanks to the steady passion of past generations of ocean mapping experts, the unveiled details of the seabed topography grew in coverage and in quality. The further 4 folios, produced continuously until the 80s, represented an indispensable reference for the world of research and hydrography lato sensu, and at the same time a resilience of the GEBCO program for almost 90 years. But there is much left to do, as we know all too well, since only 25% of the seafloor is mapped to a reasonable quality. It is still a sort of a euphemism if we name the campaign which brought all of us together here and now, Map the Gaps. The gaps still comprise 75% of the total ocean area. Much more and much faster action have to be done to meeting our ambition to fill it up to 100% by 2030. We will hear more about this in the course of this symposium. The 19th century was the great age of analog geographers to map continents, and mapping the ocean had the same relevance and recognition of the time. The 21st century is the age of digital hydrography, the last great mapping adventure. Ocean mapping can be categorized as applied science, but it is actually more than this. Ocean mapping as an action of peaceful global collaboration is merging hydrographers and oceanographers' work, the digital twins of the ocean. It is therefore logical to make the two international entities in charge, the IHO and the IOC UNESCO, the parent organization of GEBCO. It is worth to say the transition into the digital version of ocean mapping undertaken now already 30 years ago have only been possible under this common supervision. The shared parentship of IHO and IOC enabled us to bring the best capacities in ocean mapping together, as the IHO member states are mostly well in systematic surveys, but focused in the continental shelf. The IOC contributors are mainly driven by oceanographic research in deep water and remote areas, such as the Southern Ocean. A relatively new third player is nowadays made of philanthropic projects, contributing now to a high degree. They are lean and agile to address partners and newest technology in a different way as governmental bodies are able to do it. Finally, we are assisting to a proliferation of new initiatives aiming at a complete seafloor mapping. One of the most active, and on which we rotate part of this symposium, is the crowdsourced bathymetry, on which we will hear more in the course of the symposium. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those who are contributing to the success of GEBCO, and especially the Nippon Foundation, which through the Nippon Foundation GEBCO Seabed 2030 project provided a real acceleration to the GEBCO program, remarking that mapping the ocean can represent an added value in truly seeing clearly what's below the sea surface, in order to be aware of our predispositions and biases, especially our tendency to often think things are better underwater than they actually are, or focusing all of our energies on land-based conservation. The evolution of the digital sphere never stops. Since the first digital version, named the GEBCO Digital Atlas, published on CD in 1994, tools for storage, manipulation, and presentation of ocean maps have drastically changed. The notable changes in terms of technologies are those how to gather the information. This judgment applies to the methods of measurement and the career for sensors. The most significant aspect is probably the extension of the range of contributors and the consumers of the final map. GEBCO still forms the center of this endeavor, but can only grow through collaborating partnership with all parties willing to support the greater goal. This symposium, for sure, will provide impressive evidence for and will show the way forward at the same time. Thank you very much for your kind attention. There is a present for me.
There's a present. All right, thank you very much, Luigi. It was a real pleasure. And on behalf of the organizers, we have a small gift for the IHO for all of your support and for hosting this incredible event. So
the IHO is proud to have all the contributors in this hall and many others outside for contributing to the final goal, as I said. Okay. Thank you very much.
I am pleased to welcome Mr. Evert Flier next. Evert started his career in the Royal Netherlands Navy, spending 24 years. Of that 24 years, he spent 11 at sea on a variety of different Navy and sailing vessels. In 2010, he shifted career and country and became national hydrographer of Norway. During his 6-year term as director, he aimed to change the scope of hydrography from classical approach of chart production to supporting the blue economy. He now focuses on international coordination and cooperation, mostly under the umbrella of the International Hydrographic Organization and the IHO Capacity Building Subcommittee and the joint IHO-IOC UNESCO GEBCO Guiding Committee as well. He actively contributes to various other committees and travels quite a bit. So I welcome Evert Flier.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I need my glasses for this. We have this, yes, very good. Dear colleagues and friends of the ocean community, I'm thrilled to see so many of you in this very special, grand and historic venue, the Oceanographic Museum of Monaco, and welcome also especially everyone online for this year's Map the Gaps Symposium. It's a special year as we celebrate 120 years of GEBCO, 120 years of ocean discovery. And what better place to do that than here, the grand and historic venue of the Oceanographic Museum of Monaco. Thank you, Director, for having us here. GEBCO, 120 years of ocean discovery. That is worth celebrating. And I apologize beforehand that we didn't align our presentations because, of course, if we had done so, anyway, there will be some overlap. GEBCO was proposed in 1899 and became a reality in April 1903 when His Serene Highness Prince Albert I of Monaco offered to organize and finance the production of a new chart series designated the General Bathymetric Chart of the Oceans under the Prince's scientific cabinet. Luigi, you said it was 1912, and I think it was 1922, but we'll have the specialists figure out that then the responsibility of GEBCO was passed to the director of the Oceanographic Museum of Monaco in this very location where we are right now, and then in 1929 was transferred to the International Hydrographic Bureau, today the IHO. And since 1973, GEBCO has been a joint program of the International Hydrographic Organization and the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. A 2-day international symposium, venue, speakers, IT infrastructure, food, drinks, etc. It doesn't happen by itself. I would like to thank Tim Kearns from Map the Gaps and his team as the driving force behind this symposium and for pulling this all together. I'd also like to thank Jamie McMichael Phillips and his Seabed 2030 team for several reasons. The most important one for being the engine and the accelerator for GEBCO for these last 6 years and hopefully for many years to come, but also for sponsoring this event. Mid-Ocean Institute, Fugro, and T. Carta for generously co-sponsoring the symposium, the IHO's Secretariat for hosting yesterday's evening's reception, Seabed 2030 for this evening's dinner, and Andrew Schofield for facilitating tomorrow's cocktail reception on board the super yacht White Rose of Drax. For that last event, if you intend to wear socks with holes in them, you might want to reconsider. Earlier this year, at the IHO General Assembly and also at the IOC Assembly, we celebrated 120 years of GEBCO, highlighting the long history, the growing network and community, the importance of seabed knowledge for sustainably managing our oceans, a rapid improvement of that knowledge in recent years, and while we are still only at the beginning. Not too long ago, GEBCO was a rather isolated, small theme at IHO and IOC meetings, and I tried to visualize that with a picture of Point Nemo, Easter Island. It was a bit of a niche. And these last few years, GEBCO has gone mainstream with a direct representation in 2 of the 3 IHO strategic goals, but also way outside of the IHO or even IOC community, and with more than 500,000 downloads of our data sets just last year, and still growing further. The oceans, are increasingly getting the attention they deserve by initiatives such as the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and the historic new UN High Seas Treaty protecting international waters. Each of these initiatives have highlighted the need for a comprehensive global seabed information as a critical component for achieving their objectives. Knowing the shape of the seabed is vital to understanding circulation of ocean currents and associated effects on climate change, weather systems, tides, and tsunami wave propagation. Improving our knowledge of the seabed will allow us to better prepare for and mitigate possible impacts of a changing climate. GEBCO is one of the longest-running ocean mapping data collection, compilation, and distribution programs in history. And yet, after 120 years, we are still only at the beginning of Earth's last great mapping endeavor. The challenge of coordinating global mapping efforts and making ocean depth available has been the primary objective for GEBCO for 120 years. This combination for the need for a comprehensive seafloor map supporting a sustainable ocean and planet and a recognition of the profound lack of seabed knowledge led to another initiative. And this is what happens if you make last-minute changes to your presentation. So I added this slide before the one that I was supposed to show now. And this is sometimes, the group of people you see here can represent, well, it can represent many people, but it can represent, in our case, 2 people. One is policymakers that are not realizing the importance of the oceans. The other is perhaps within our own community, the IHO community, because talking about ocean mapping is something that we can do very well to ourselves. But lifting ourselves and outreaching to the bigger community and making them aware is something that we have room for improvement. So I'll quickly slide through what was supposed to be supporting the different initiatives that we've seen. And then this one for the protecting the High Seas Treaty. And then we get to this other great initiative. It was in 2017 that the Nippon Foundation GEBCO Seabed 2030 project was established to accelerate GEBCO's mission and with the ambitious goal to complete the mapping of the seafloor by 2030. During the project's first 6 years, data sharing and ocean mapping mobilization efforts have quadrupled the area covered by directly measured depth soundings. And to put into perspective how much has been done and made publicly available in recent years, we have gone from 22 million square kilometers of directly measured seabed knowledge in 2017, which area-wise is less than the North American continent, to 90 million square kilometers in 2023, 3 times the African continent, 2 times Asia, or 61% of all our planet's land area together. And still, we are only at the beginning, as 75% of the seafloor remains unmapped. And that's where we need all of us, all of you, to contribute to make maximum use of our research vessels, other capable vessels, and ships of opportunities at all times, and not waste a single opportunity to log depth information. Displaying the surface of our planet onto a 2-dimensional map, one can choose from many projections. One of my favorite, this one, developed right after the Second World War by a fellow named Spilhaus, the Spilhaus projection. It shows our planet as one ocean and how the oceans connect us all as coastal states and affects us all no matter where we live. Map the Gaps has once again organized a great program. Day 1 will show some of the latest relevant technological breakthroughs, status of current ocean mapping programs, and special topics on ocean floor exploration. And Day 2 sets the spotlight on crowdsourced bathymetry, a topic I got personally engaged with many years ago as I saw its potential to mobilize a bigger public to contribute to ocean mapping. Unfortunately, crowdsourced bathymetry is still not sufficiently understood, embraced, and supported by our own IHO community, sometimes stamping crowdsourced data as being insufficient quality. Insufficient for what purpose? Or insufficient for any purpose if it's the only data we have available? Crowdsourced bathymetry data is simply a very effective and low-cost way to collect data and can come at many different levels of quality in a world where official hydrographic data collection is time-consuming and costly, and therefore for the foreseeable future available for prioritized parts of our coastal areas. Some crowdsourced data is definitely better than official hydrographic data that we have in our charts from the late 1800s. But crowdsourced data is also a great way to mobilize the bigger public, making them aware of the importance of collecting and sharing seabed knowledge. GEBCO has dealt with crowdsourced bathymetry collection from the very start in 1903, writing to hydrographic offices, oceanographic institutes, and universities all over the world, asking for depth sounding data. And after 2 years of collection, this resulted in just over 30,000 depth sounding points, and the first GEBCO chart series could be produced and be made publicly available in 1905. And today, with both the IHO Crowdsourced Bathymetry Initiative and Seabed 2030 engaging in crowdsourced bathymetry, supporting GEBCO's mission, crowdsourced bathymetry is more relevant than ever. As stated before, crowdsourced bathymetry is sometimes still treated with skepticism within our own community, and I believe it would help if we would use the term as one of several methods for bathymetric data collection, not as the name for a product or service at the end of the value chain. On several occasions, we have heard about why it is important to have this base layer of ocean knowledge, the depth and shape of the seafloor, improved and made publicly available. In addition to all the rational and scientific reasons, do we not have an obligation to mankind, to humanity, to complete the work of our adventurous ancestors, like Leif Erikson, Admiral Zhang He of China, Jean Barret of France, and Mary Thorpe and Bruce Heason to discover the remaining part of our planet. After the Second World War, humankind's inquisitive nature and technological advancements shifted towards outer space. But in the recent words of Bill Gates, space, we have a lot to do here on Earth. Only 2% of the total global research budgets is ocean-related. Therefore, getting governments, science institutes, and industry to work together towards improving ocean knowledge and completing the mapping of our planet is the main task of GEBCO. With so much ocean still unknown, we need to invest in future generations to get them involved. That's why we have established a new GEBCO subcommittee on education and training with the aim to provide a network for universities and marine science institutions that provide oceanography courses, ensuring the next generation can be made aware of the importance of our work and hopefully can commit to investing their careers to contributing to this mapping endeavor. GEBCO is strongly supported by its two parent organizations, the IHO and the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, and thus by all the hydrographers and oceanographers of the world. GEBCO is the only publicly available, authoritative, global, compiled, and gridded bathymetric dataset that is more and more widely used by a diverse group of users. GEBCO can be considered as the foundation of the digital twin of the ocean, but most of all, GEBCO is a network of voluntary, passionate, professional people, ocean scientists, hydrographers, and industry representatives working towards the same goal to finish the last Earth's great mapping endeavor. Congratulations to you all for the GEBCO 120-year anniversary and for continuously contributing to improving GEBCO. And finally, next year, GEBCO's meetings and events will take place in the center of this 2D world map projection in the Pacific, in Fiji, and will have a Pacific orientation as they are perhaps some of the regions most affected by climate change and therefore have an even bigger interest in what we can contribute with. And with that, I conclude my opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Evert. Oh, glasses. Our keynote speaker today, Victor Vescovo, is truly a special guest. He has been a private investor for over 30 years, helping raise over $1 billion in equity financing for a wide range of investments. He's more recently known for his exploration and adventure activities. In 2017, Victor completed the Explorer's Grand Slam, which requires climbing the highest peak on all 7 of the world's continents, including Mount Everest, and skiing at least 100 kilometers to the North and South Poles. He piloted the first repeated dives of the ocean's deepest point, Challenger Deep, in the Pacific Mariana Trench, now 15 times. I haven't even been once. And in 2019, became the first person to visit the 5 deeps, the deepest point in all 5 of the world's oceans. Victor has now personally explored the bottom of 17 deep ocean trenches and made 3 dives to the Titanic, including the only solo dive ever made there. He has a wide range of accomplishments and is an incredible speaker, and I look forward to having him share with us his thoughts today.
Thank you, Tim, very much. And greetings to you all. Thank you very much for the kind invitation to be here. I'll go ahead and start my comments by saying I am not from your community. I didn't know anything about ocean mapping or the technologies about 6 years ago. And the way I got started was I was looking for a challenge when I realized I was getting too old and it was getting far too dangerous to be climbing over mountaintops. So with that, I will start my remarks. This is what I'll be covering today. I'll be speaking about my experience, why I did the 5 deeps. Where? Oh, thank you. Permitting issues, which is probably, as I've said multiple times now, the #1 barrier to deep ocean exploration, as I see it. Naming seafloor features, a subject near and dear to some of y'all's hearts. The cost to map, actually doing the math. That's one thing I hope I bring to the table to a lot of these discussions, is that I'm a businessman first and foremost, and I'm trained in finance. I'll do the calculations of just what does it take to map the seafloor. I'll put the dollars on it and show you what I see. And then finally, given that, how can we enable what we're all here for, which is more mapping? First, the 5 deeps and the Ring of Fire expeditions. We've all seen this map many, many times. The black areas are the areas of the globe where we have not mapped. And this is something that I find personally offensive, that here we are in the year 2023, and we do not know the nature of 75% of the world's oceans. That should bother more people than just the people in this community, but people at large. This is something we need to do as a species. The 5 deeps, as I mentioned, started when I was looking for a technological challenge. I found it extraordinary in the year 2016 when I started this whole project that only 2 visits had ever been made to the bottom of Challenger Deep, and no human being had been to the bottom of 4 of our world's 5 oceans. That was, again, a bit offensive to me technologically, because we certainly had the capacity to do that. And I come from a culture in Texas where we don't typically rely on other people to get things done for us. So I said, if not me, then who? So I thought it was an interesting project to potentially undertake. And after a year or 2 of analysis, I figured out that this was something I could do with the proper team, which I then began to assemble. So the idea was to go to the bottom of all 5 of the world's oceans and then to stop by some other locations to verify some of these depths and to dive Titanic because it was on the way. So what did we need? We actually needed to build the most advanced deep ocean submersible that had been built up to that time. 2-person, made out of titanium, and capable of what became unlimited depth to DNV. And some people ask, well, why was it limited in that manner? Really not limited. And that's because I think it was such a well-tested machine to 14,000 meters that I think DNV wanted us to explore any place on the ocean floor if we happen to find someplace even deeper than the 11,000 meters in the Challenger Deep. So we had an incredible tool that was able to make repeated dives to the absolute bottom of the ocean safely and reliably. And what that meant was we now had a tool that could go anywhere on the seafloor repeatedly and safely. And you need a ship. I remarked last night, not in jest, that I will probably never own another ship. They are extremely expensive, but this was a really unique vessel. It was a former US Navy ship that was designed to hunt submarines. And why that was incredibly useful was that it was incredibly quiet, which allowed us to have very good mapping capability, but also the ability to speak with the submarine when it was down 7 miles in the ocean. Very quiet, very capable ship. Had a crew of approximately 20, had a submarine hangar. It critically had 3 full ocean depth capable landers. I'll get more on that later. We had to dramatically improve the satellite communications. And by the end of the 5 Deeps expedition, which some of the people in this room understand and helped with, we were able to do remote mapping, where we actually didn't need sonar operators on the ship to do very highly detailed sonar maps of the ocean floor. So we only had a 1,000 meter echo sounder when we started, but then this happened. Where are the deepest points in the ocean? This is a critical question that was asked in 2016. Naive as I am, not knowing exactly what we were going to do or where we were going to go, I thought, oh, we would just go to GEBCO or Google or wherever, or Wikipedia. Of course we know where the bottom of all 5 of the world's oceans are. Certainly we know that. But then the wonderful oceanographer and geologist, Dr. Heather Stewart of the Royal Geographic Society, was in one of our initial meetings. She raised her hand and said, Victor, you know, actually we don't know where the bottom of 4 of the world's oceans is, right? I went, really? Well, how do we find that out? She says, well, you're going to need a sonar, and a big one, which led to the purchase of the Kongsberg EM124. This is serial number 1. I didn't realize how dangerous that was to buy serial number 1 of any large sonar, but it was extremely capable. And through the incredible work of sonar master Cassie Bongiovanni from my hometown of Dallas as well, we were able to construct this sonar, install it on the bottom of the pressure drop, and begin the process of mapping the oceans. It became an adjunct to the mission of diving to the bottom of the oceans, but mapping soon became something I became personally passionate about. So this was one of our first maps. Hopefully you can see a little bit of that. On the left is actually the bathymetric map of the Puerto Rican Trench. So to get our training legs out from under us, we actually took the EM124. We did something I didn't know about called calibration. That took about 3 or 4 days. Significant amount of debugging, But then we're able to get the characterization of the bottom of the Puerto Rican Trench, and without boring you with some of the technical details involving the sub, was able to do a dive to the very bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, which you see there on the right. And yes, you are looking at human contamination at the bottom of the Puerto Rican Trench, which was ever present, but unfortunate. But we were able to go to the bottom there, and because it was over 8,000 meters, we had very high confidence that the sub would perform well. So then we took it to the Southern Ocean, and that is a remote place if none of you have ever been there. In fact, that's where they put on the maps of old, "Here be dragons," and now I understand why. Oceans there are incredibly rough. In 30 days of intensive operations mapping the South Sandwich Trench, we were able to execute one successful submersible dive. We also had a collision between the ship and the sub in the Southern Ocean because the oceans were so difficult. On the far left, you actually see something you will very rarely see, if ever in your life. That's Thule Island in the South Atlantic. One of the most remote places I've ever seen. It looked like dragons lived there with smoke and fog coming off of these epic mountains in the middle of nowhere. Just mapping required coordination every day with the staff, as you see on the right. Where are we going? How can we handle the weather? What was the data like the previous day? And we think it was one of the most exhaustive mapping missions done in that part of the world, maybe in the last 15 or 20 years, because no one had ever really mapped the South Sandwich Trench. But this is what really captured my imagination, and this is, I think, an image that hopefully, I think it was mentioned earlier, what can this community do to engage more people outside your community to be interested in ocean mapping? Whoops. Most people, when they look at Google, they think we've mapped the seafloor. I'm being serious. Now, that's laughable to you all, but I'm telling you, to 99% of the people in the world who pay taxes and want to fund ocean research, they look at Google, they see the seafloor, they think it's been mapped. What they're looking at is what's on the left and the right of this image, gravimetric mapping. What you see in the middle is what we all want. That's an EM124 representation of the South Sandwich Trench. That's real mapping. And we need to show people that this is what we need to do for our planet. For example, the Meteor Deep, the deepest point in the South Atlantic, was, according to all knowledge, the red dot on the left. When we mapped it with the 124, we found an entire new set of canyons and mountain ridges, and the deepest point in the Southern Trench, the South Sandwich Trench, is actually the yellow dot to the right. I think it's more than 40 miles away. So these are basic things we don't know about our planet that mapping can help us do, and they're beautiful maps. And then there's the whole issue of where was the deepest point in the Indian Ocean? In 2016, it actually wasn't definitively known. There were two candidates. Richard Branson thought it was in the Diamantina fracture zone. Other people thought it was in the Java Trench. No one knew. So we actually diverted the ship to go to the Diamantina to not only map it, but drop a lander and physically measure the depth of the Diamantina Trench and then go to the Java. And that's why the landers were so critically important. Sonar is great, but if you can do physical visitation with a lander or with a submersible multiple times, now you really know how deep it is, because the error term is much lower. So we were able to validate the depth of the Diamantina by dropping a lander in there and then comparing it with what we did in the Java Trench. This was something that was something added later in our expedition. These are things that are built by RBR of Great Britain, and these are depthometers, very compact, quite accurate, and they had just produced depthometers that could go down to 11,000 meters. So what did we do? I bought 6 of them. And we would put 2 or 3 on the submersible, sometimes 4, in addition to 2 Seabird CTDs. That would allow us to have 6 physical measurements at the very bottom of the ocean, multiple times. And then we used that to check what the sonar was reading, which gave us incredibly detailed maps that otherwise we would not have had. So what happened with Indian Ocean? Well, the Diamantina was close, 183 meters shallower than the Java Trench. And where was the deepest point in the Java Trench? We didn't know that either. So we went up and down the entire length of it. And actually, most people thought it was near the Karakoram on the Krakatoa, on the far left part, and it wasn't. It was actually right south of Bali in the center. But that leads me to what we call the Java Trench incident. As I mentioned earlier, the number one barrier to deep ocean research, in my own view, is permitting. We were trying to get a permit to dive in the EEZ, to dive to the very bottom of the Java Trench, which had never been done before. We applied for a permit from the government of Indonesia 1.5 years in advance. There was actually a conference about oceanography in Jakarta. I flew all the way from Texas to Jakarta just to go to that one meeting to explain what we were doing, why we were doing it. We'd be sharing all of our information, nothing. No permit, no real communication. We finally got to the point where we were off the coast of Indonesia, encouraged to go there by the Indonesian government because they said, oh, your permit will be coming any day. The day that we last had to dive in the Java Trench, still no permit, but no denial either. So then it comes down to the wonderful interpretation of the UN Law of the Sea. What is marine scientific research? Can anyone here tell me? It's ambiguous. So if all we do is go down in the water and sightsee and do not take any real measurements, is that marine scientific research or not? We were testing equipment, we were testing the landers, we were testing the sub. So we made one dive to the bottom of the Java Trench and came back up, still had no definitive word. A day later, we found out that the permit had been denied on national security grounds in an EEZ. According to the UN Law of the Sea, as far as I read it, that's actually not a valid reason to deny a permit. And so from that time forward, never went back to Indonesia. And I probably never will go to Indonesia again, nor will people I speak with that want to conduct marine research, because some governments, like Indonesia and how they treated us, is so difficult. There are easier places in the world to go do research. We don't need that level of difficulty. So then we went to the Challenger Deep, a much more constructive place to do research. And this is the current map of the Challenger Deep as of 2023. This shows the survey that we did with the EM-124 in 2019. Of course, we have much higher resolution than this, but it shows all the dives that have now been done there. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've actually done 20 dives into the Challenger Deep. I've personally done 15, but that's what all the yellow dots are. And we were able to get very good characterization of the seafloor. This is a 3D map that we were able to construct. This is the type of animation, the type of, call it for what it is, but wonderful eye candy that the lay people find fascinating and gets them engaged on trying to understand what the seafloor looks like, how exotic it is, and how exciting it can be to map things that have never been mapped before. This is the most accurate current map of the Challenger Deep. Helped built, I believe Roxy might be in the audience. I think she helped build this. There you are. She helped build this exact map, which helped us target the different dive areas. 3D representation of the Challenger Deep. If your daughter asks you where the deepest point in the ocean is, show her this. That yellow dot is it. One thing people don't really realize either is that we didn't just dive a submersible to the bottom of Challenger Deep. We were doing extensive bathymetric analysis to really get its characterization. The triangles that you see on this map are lander drops that we did in a single year. We have probably done over 50 lander drops across the Challenger Deep with multiple depth measuring devices. So we've been able to validate the sonar maps with multiple full ocean depth physical measurements. Not only that, the submersible itself did transects. So we would take the submersible down to one edge of the Challenger Deep and then drive it across the entire length to the other side. This is actually what the depth actually looked like according to the sub, and that box in the middle shows that we had 5 depth measurement devices on it, 2 CTDs from Seabird and 3 RBRs, which gave us an incredible amount of accuracy. And then the EM-124 gave us what it thought that depth measurement was. So not just one, but like 4 times we did that. So we ended up with a paper that was published by NOAA, by the head of oceanography, Commander Greenway, but also supervised by Dr. Kathy Sullivan, the first person at the bottom of the ocean and former head of NOAA. How deep is the ocean? According to all of their math, all the data that we collected over 4 years, over 20 dives in Challenger, it's 10,935 meters, plus or minus 6 meters at a 95% confidence interval. I challenge anyone to come up with a better estimate and show me your data. But wait, is the horizon deep actually deeper? That was a question that was asked. People said, no one's really been there, so you might have to go and make sure that that's not deeper either, which we did. So we went down to the horizon deep in the sub, physical measurement, and it was 112 meters shallower. And what was interesting is that, no one really knew that we were doing this, but it was actually kind of an exciting story, at least to us on the ship. And we also had a small fire in the submarine, but that's okay. Dealt with that. This is what the bottom of the Malloy Deep looks like. I included this just for fun. it looks a lot different. Every deep ocean trench has been subtly different. So at 5,500 meters, no one had really been down there personally, but that's what it looks like. Fantastic place to dive off Svalbard. Okay, then we did other things. No one had ever dived or mapped the Aleutian Trench before. So we did the first full-length mapping with high resolution of the Aleutian Trench, and we did that for NOAA, just gratis. When we asked the government if they could support us in any way, could they at least give us fuel for this mission that we were undertaking completely pro bono? They said no. Could you pay for any port access or any other fees? No. Anything for mapping the Aleutian Trench for the first time on 2 sweeps? No. Okay, that's encouraging. Then we continued on, came to the Mediterranean, were able to dive to the bottom of the Mediterranean with Prince Albert here of Monaco, and saw more contamination by human beings than I saw in any other location in any place on the world. It was awful. And that was really tragic, but it was great to have Prince Albert there in the sub because he saw it firsthand. I'll click through some of these pretty rapidly because I want to get to the conclusion. But a lot of this is just citizen mapping, an individual, myself, who wanted to contribute to global mapping and putting my own dollars at work because these actually started to become very interesting problems to me. And this community can make some interesting problems to other people that have the means to support marine mapping and research. You've got to make it interesting. Whether you realize it or not, one common expression in business, whether you believe it or not, you're all in marketing. You're not just technicians. If you want more people to engage with what you do and to support what you do, you need to market it, and to market it to people that don't normally work in your circles. Okay, by the way, another aside, Kamchatka Trench, it's not 10,000 meters deep. We made 2 passes, it's 9,661. There are four 10,000 meter trenches in the world. Challenger Deep, the Philippine Trench, the Kermadec, and the Tonga. That's it. And that's the Philippines. And I mentioned this one because we took down Dr. Dio Onda, the Philippines. Getting local communities involved in the diving and the mapping is critical to getting local support, getting permit support. That's all very important. And then finally, the last big expedition we did last year was the so-called Ring of Fire, South Pacific. We went to 4 deep ocean trenches and mapped and dove them as well. That's the mighty Kermadec, huge trench. It was the first detailed mapping of its entire length, and we actually dove it as well. You can see how broad and wide it was, an amazing place. And 6 months later, I believe the Chinese went down with their Fenju submersible. Right now, there are only 2 submersibles in the world capable of full ocean depth. The one we privately built in the US and one owned by the Chinese government. That's it, which I find extraordinary. Okay, so over the 4 years of intensive exploration, we circumnavigated the globe twice. We mapped 3 to 4 million square kilometers of seafloor and donated all of it to GEBCO, as was correct. Okay, a book was written about the mapping called The Deepest Map. If you haven't heard about the book or read it, I would highly recommend it, by Laura Trethewey. She details not just what we did, but also some of the things that occurred at Skufin and other members of this community in terms of how we tried to name seafloor features. Okay, permitting issues. I'll buzz through this really quick. So, according to data I collected from IHO, only 27 countries out of 151 countries with a coastline responded to what are your rules about mapping. Of those, 9 restrict multi-beam echo sounding or require pre-approval. 10, wonderfully, have no apparent restrictions, and 8 require at least some review. Many restrictive countries did not even respond. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, at least not to the data that I was able to see. And this is what the actual tables look like. The ones in red are the countries that actually have restrictions, where you can't just go provide a multi-beam map and then give it to GEBCO, as should be the case. How would anyone even know if you're conducting a multi-beam survey in an EEZ 150 miles off a coastline? It's ridiculous. But countries like Australia, Brazil, Canada, come on, Canada. Let us do a multi-beam and give it to GEBCO. Really? You require approval? You have the largest coastline in the world. You're making it too hard. Other countries. Norway. Sorry, Evert. You guys require, oh, sorry. But the Norwegians, no multi-beam activity without prior permission in the areas of Norway. Really, you're making it difficult. All these other countries, Peru, the Philippines, Uruguay, the USA, thank gosh, I don't have to be critical of my own country, there are no restrictions at all. You can multi-beam to your heart's content, map, and then give it to GEBCO. That's how it should be. Oops. There's the Netherlands. They have pretty intensive restrictions that you must follow in order to do multi-beam and then submit it to GEBCO. Again, it's very inconsistent. And that's one thing that even UNCLOS couldn't decide on what marine scientific research was, so everybody defines it their own way. This is actually a map I constructed based on that table showing where you can and can't do multi-beam easily. The green areas are the high seas, where they don't have any restrictions. But all the other areas are EEZs, where there are some restrictions. Look at where all the red are, or the slightly green where you have to do something. And the blue is actually some degree of pre-approval is necessary. That's a lot of area. And the mission of this group is actually to map the seafloor. It's going to be really, really hard with these restrictions. Okay, here's an incident that actually happened. We had a plan for over a year and a half to do the first human descent to the bottom of the Mesoamerican Trench off the coast of Mexico. For a year and a half, we tried to get a permit. I was going to take down Dr. Elva Escobar, one of the most prominent and talented oceanographers in Mexico. She would be the first person with me piloting to the bottom of the Mesoamerican Trench, and she's Mexican. It would be perfect. Never got a response from the Mexican government up until the day where we had to leave. It just didn't happen because there was no support, which we found very unfortunate. But that's the environment that people like me operate in, that are trying to do good things, mapping and taking people down. Now, conversely, the island nation of Palau was wonderful. I was able to take down the former president of Palau, Raymond Gasal. We were the first two people at the bottom of the Palauan Trench. And then they asked us, hey, by the way, could you map these critical areas around Palau for us on your way in and way out? We said, of course we could. So there was good cooperation between the two. We had a wonderful mission, and we were able to do a lot of good mapping. That's how it should be. Naming seafloor features. I'll hit this really quickly. Okay, we all know that here are the rules. According to IHO, in an EEZ, the country gets to decide, so that's just out. If you're an individual like myself and you're trying to run around map the seafloor, what do you really get out of it, other than just being a nice person and you're doing a good thing? Being able to name prominent seafloor features is interesting. Explorers have been doing it since the dawn of time, but it can't be a live person. It should reflect nearby features, and it must be approved by SCUFIN, which is a very varied group of people. Well, we were fortunate when we did the South Sandwich Trench, we were able to significantly map the whole trench, and we were able to map a lot of places. The deepest point in the Southern Ocean is now named the Factorian Deep, after the submarine, the limiting factor, which is tradition. However, we tried to name about 100 to 120 features, and therefore, if you're not really going to get a lot of approvals, or it's going to be very, very difficult, it's very strict and very hard to do. The bottom line from this, after dealing with SCUFIN multiple times, having to resubmit things 3 or even 4 times, the process became so difficult that it has lost its attraction, where I stopped doing it. There are other things I could have applied to SCUFIN to name. I could have undertaken more sonar and mapping missions, but it just wasn't worth it anymore. It was too difficult. That's just my perspective. Okay, so we talked about that. All right, now, last thing I'll talk about, which is the cost to map. Okay, this is my ship, the Pressure Drop. I've recently sold it to Gabe Newell's Inkfish organization. They're continuing their operation. At the end of the day, average cost to operate a hydrographic survey ship like that with an EM124 was almost $50,000 a day. Crew of 20, consumes a lot of fuel. It's more expensive than you think. And let's assume you can only, high rate of usage, 80% of the time at sea. It still's got to go in and get maintained, got to go into dry dock. But there's about 360 million square kilometers of seafloor, 25% is mapped. If you do the math, it ends up, if you're using a ship like this, it costs about $9.60 per square kilometer to map. Doesn't sound like a lot, but if you multiply it by the amount of seafloor left, it's $2 to $3 billion. Just by comparison, NASA just launched a satellite to survey the asteroid Psyche. That's a $1.5 billion single satellite mission. 50% of the cost to map the entire seafloor. So the imbalance in funding is stark when you put it in those terms. But if GEBCO wants to map the entire seafloor by 2030, it will take 185 years for one ship to do it. 26 ships to do it over the next 7 years. I don't think we have 26 ships. So we need other alternatives. What are the other alternatives? People talk about drones. What about sail drone? Well, it's done some interesting deployments. It can do about 400 square kilometers a day, but it costs $7.5 million. When you do the math there, assuming some generic assumptions that I think are reasonable, it's probably about $10 to $12 per square kilometer. It's actually not cheaper than a manned oceanographic survey vessel. That's not the solution either. So what is the solution? How do we enable more mapping? Well, the alternatives that people throw out there generally are, we just need more cost-effective sail drones. But whenever you try and make something completely autonomous, you're gonna make it much more expensive. You're gonna have to make it more durable because it's gonna be out there alone, unsupervised. How about coaxing more yachts to mount more powerful sonars? Crowdsourcing model. That can work, but if you, here, this is important, if you want volume of mapping, if you wanna move the needle on the percentage of the seafloor that is mapped, you have to go into the deep ocean. That's where you get the swath width with a good sonar going to 4,000 to 6,000 meters. Coastal mapping is very interesting and effective for people working in coastal areas, but you're not going to move the needle in getting that percentage up. So you need survey ships. Yachts aren't going to do it, I don't think. They help, but they're not the solution. Could private research foundations help? Yes, but I can name personally 5 or 6 high net worth individuals that would drop $1 million or $2 million to support oceanographic research and mapping if they only knew how and where to put it and know that it would be well used. Which brings to the final point I'll make, which is this. What do we need? We need high efficiency mapping solutions. I come at this from a business perspective. What's the minimum thing you need? Well, you need a sonar. You can get a good, decent sonar from Kongsberg for about $500,000. They can go down to 4,000 to 6,000 meters. You would design a ship with that sonar on the bottom, like an EM 304. You would design it from the outset to do one thing and one thing only, to go out into the ocean, map for 3 or 4 weeks, come back, refuel, get some maintenance, go back out, do it again. Why would it have to be crewed? Because it's really effective. There'd be someone guarding the ship, someone that could bring it back if something breaks, and there are designs, I think, that are capable of doing this. So if you were able to have a vessel for $1.5 million, maybe even call it $2 million, and it's designed to do nothing but mapping in these areas, $300,000 a year of operations and maintenance cost, you're getting down to $3 or $4 per square kilometer. That starts getting interesting. I personally would buy a $1.5 million vessel like this, put it in Micronesia, and do nothing but map the deep ocean for the next 10 years. Why? It hits a price point that's attractive to private philanthropic organizations. Buying a $30 million ship with a 20-person crew, not going to happen. Now, really interesting advantages of this model is that you would have local involvement. You would position these ships and they would have local crew, they would source local materials, local maintenance. It would be, in many respects, somewhat the property of the country whose area you're mapping in their AEZ. That would actually make permitting very easy because that would be, in a sense, one of their resources. This is something that you can't do with a sail drone, that if something looks colonial, that's it. It's this high-tech robot coming into their ocean, mapping their seafloor, and they're getting nothing out of it. You have to involve the local community, and this is one way to do it. And it has potentially rapid and broad deployment. You could hopefully build several of these vessels within 2 to 3 years and have them out there mapping within 5, easily. Oops. So, those are the big barriers. Sonar, ship, operators, all of these can be addressed by methods we've been investigating over the last 4 years. Putting sonar on highly efficient, smaller ships, doing remote operations of the sonar, which we've proven can be done, and that will provide a high return on investment. And there's not much you can do about EEZ permits in hostile countries, but at least it'll allow you to get a lot more mapping done in the friendly areas. It all comes down to funding, but if you have a more cost-effective manner to map the seafloor, you can get the funding from private operators. So those are my comments. Thank you. I'm happy to take just a couple of questions if there are any. Any questions at all? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, thank you. Gemma from UK Hydrographic Office. Just wanted to ask, if you're going to standardize marine scientific research, how would you do that?
As liberally as possible. Because what I have seen happen is that the clause in the UNCLOS that refers to marine scientific research is being used more and more by countries to be more and more restrictive, almost to the point where they're trying to use EEZs as territorial waters. You see that happening with certain countries like China, like Russia, and it should not be the case. That was not the intent of the UNCLOS, if you go back and look at the working papers. And so there needs to be a push back by the international community saying, if look, we want to map the seafloor, if we want to do good scientific research, it can't be restrictive. Marine scientific research should be automatically granted on a permitting basis unless there are specific and explicit issues mentioned in the UNCLOS, and that is not the case today.
Thank you.
Victor, thank you. This has been absolutely fascinating. I do want to make one slight editorial comment with regards to the chart that you had up, and that chart that you had up as to the response of IHO member states, it was specifically tailored to the question of CSB. And so I agree with you that many nations, coastal states, are conflating CSB with MSR or hydrographic surveying, but from the standpoint of MSR, even countries like the United States would require a permit from a nation who wanted to do MSR within the zone of the EEZ. So yes, from the standpoint of CSB, the US and Palau, and I believe we have one other nation, Papua New Guinea, where there are no restrictions, no caveats placed upon the uploading of CSB data to the DCDB and making that as publicly available as possible. But I applaud your efforts, your innovation, your creativity to this problem set. And I would also just encourage other nations to look at maximizing the free availability of CSB to help us map the seabed. Thank you.
I should explain real quick. If governments require that we provide a copy of the multi-beam for them, absolutely. That's perfectly fair play. And we did that in the case of Chile and Peru, et cetera. But I'll give you one specific example, which was fascinating, because we were operating kind of at the sharp end of the spear here on the 5 Deeps expedition. We actually just started mapping around Seychelles, and they were encouraging us to do so. And then after we had mapped all around their area, they sent me a notice saying, well, we need you to sign this permit to map in our waters. And I said, I'm not signing anything. I don't need a permit to map in your areas. You said I don't. It's multi-beam. I'm going to give you a copy, and there you go. Well, I said, no, we're approving your permit. You just need to sign it saying you acknowledge this permit. And I refused. I gave them the data, and they dropped it out. The point being was, by signing that document, I would have acknowledged implicitly that I needed a permit to do nothing but simply map the ocean. And maybe I'm operating in the gray area, but I am trying to push back, operating as I was for 4 years in all these different countries, trying to say, according to the UN Law of the Sea, it doesn't say one needs a permit to do multi-beam mapping in an EEZ. Territorial waters, yes, I get that, but not an EEZ. If I had been out there operating, constantly asking for permits, I would be sanctioning, making it more and more difficult for us to map the ocean.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure. Does that make me a pirate? Jamie.
Victor, thank you very much for a fascinating presentation, and I know we touched on some of this last evening. I think I'd just like to offer my thanks on behalf of the mapping community for all the work you have done at your own expense to enhance and accelerate ocean mapping and to progress filling in those gaps in the GEBCO grid. I think Steve really probably touched on what I was going to say, but one thing I will say about the list that you put up of countries, there are a lot of countries that are not on it because they have not responded to that letter. So my plea is, if you're one of those countries, please encourage your authorities to respond at least so we have an answer.
Right. Ambiguity is a barrier. One more, and then we'll pass. Luigi. Piacere.
So thank you very much, and just a comment about your frustration in showing the situation along on the coastal states. Let me say that the similar frustration we have also at the IHO, but we are not lowering our attention, and we're continuing to push the coastal states. But it's something definitely more difficult than what can appear from your words, and it's something with which we are fighting every day, because probably it's missing the real value of having a full knowledge of the ocean. And when you go to the government and that we have to respect for their position with reference to the UNCLOS, it's remaining frustrating. But we are not lowering our attention, and we are continuing to push the coastal states to raise the awareness of having a global map of the ocean. Right. Thank you. And if we were 10, 12 replica of you, probably, we can reach the 100% very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, I understand. And the last comment I'll make is, if my remarks appear a bit pointed, I view that in some respects as a private citizen and operator as my role. I am not beholden to any government or international institution. And so in order to speak truthfully about what I directly experienced in very plain terms, I think has some utility. So again, if my remarks have been a bit pointed, it's just how I have seen them, but I hope that that allows you to provide some degree of pressure to achieve your objectives. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're at that favorite time of the day where we get some coffee, but I don't see any coffee. It's coming. Whew, thank goodness. I thought we were just going to have to continue on for a second there, and I was going to have to come up with another joke. I have another joke. What did the ocean say to the beach? Nothing. It just waved. I'm a dad. I'm loaded with them. Okay, let's break for coffee. A sharp 30 minutes for those who are online. We will start again at 11 a.m. GMT +1 CET. For those in the audience, we will start right at 11 o'clock local. Our next session is Innovation Spotlight on Technology. We have two fascinating presentations and some discussion afterwards, moderated by Neil Tinmouth. Thank you.